All right, guys, we got a new section to the America Happens website called the Whistleblowers Forum, where you could go on there and anonymously or using your name post anything that you want and contact other whistleblowers to talk about what's really going on out there.
I want to take this opportunity to give a brief overview of the Flores matter. This is a matter that I believe that was unjust, and it was actually a setup, in my opinion. When Sheriff Bianco campaigned in his first term, he had a goal of so-called rooting out corruption. And I think he wanted to achieve that goal with the Flores investigation and to show the public that he was tough on corruption no matter what. Sheriff Bianco signed the investigation to a 6-year employee, former Deputy Sheriff Nicholas Jones, as opposed to an experienced master investigator. In my opinion, Jones and his supervisor at the time, Sergeant Sean Brown, ignored the facts in order to meet Bianco's predisposed disposition of guilt, and or they were severely incompetent in their investigations. And just real briefly over some examples. Jones failed to document interviews he conducted, and that was stated by him in testimony, under sworn testimony. He was dishonest in his testimony and failed to investigate clear evidence of domestic violence and insurance fraud by former Deputy Kevin Carpenter. Additionally, Sheriff Bianco withheld a very crucial report to the employees that was conducted by independent investigator Eric Nevins. His original report was approximately 187 pages long, a very detailed, very thorough investigation. Instead of providing that investigator Eric Nevins' report, one of the employees, Sergeant Lenton, removed 57 pages of Nevins' report and altered the conclusions. Now, if you disagree with someone's conclusions, then you should write a supplemental report document. So Sergeant Lenton should have followed the proper procedure and say, hey, I disagree with this investigation and this is why. And then Sheriff Bianco can make a decision on that. The Deputy District Attorneys on the case, Deputy District Attorney Dave Allen and Deputy District Attorney Natasha Soresi, did a masterful job in distorting the truth and covering for former Deputy Sheriff Investigator Jones' dishonesty. And I'll give you one example, but there's many. One of the questions that Soresi asked is, other than the 79 Corvette, what did Flores get for free? Well, there was clear and convincing evidence that Flores never received the 79 Corvette. He's not a Corvette guy, right? In fact, they had lien sale documents from the DMV documenting who purchased the vehicle in San Diego. I'll use his initials, BM, from San Diego, but they never verified the information on that document. So lien sale documents, from what I understand, is a tow yard or a garage wants to lien sell a vehicle that they have. They fill out certain documents and they send it to DMV. DMV accepts those documents, stamps it as received, but they never verify the information that was put on the document as true and accurate. It's just promised to, it's true and accurate under penalty of perjury. Well, people sign these all the time. And this is an example of, Investigator Jones, former Investigator Jones's incompetence or, intentionally deceiving, the people involved in the investigation. He received those, but he never verified that information. He never interviewed the automotive repair shop that's listed on it. He never interviewed BM, and there's also another name on there. He never interviewed these individuals to verify that this was true and accurate. So, in a brief overview, what I determined based on my analysis of the investigation is either it was gross incompetence or intentional to deceive the true facts of what this investigation revealed. It revealed, one, there's clear indications of domestic violence, and why Sheriff Bianco and now his undersheriff, who's supposed to succeed him, Donald Sharp, why they did not bifurcate this investigation and have they have a special crimes victims unit and investigate those allegations that they received of domestic violence. And when I say the allegations, there's clear evidence based on text messages that former Investigator Jones and his supervisor, Sean Brown, who's now a captain, received and reviewed all the text messages and emails to indicate there was domestic violence. And in fact, what I've discovered, the victim of these claiming domestic violence asked about her case to former investigator Jones, his supervisor, and even the DA's office, but got no response whatsoever. You're pretty desperate when you're calling the defense and saying, hey, what do you know about my case, my domestic violence case? So in my opinion, they clearly covered it up. They clearly ignored it. And the whole purpose for this was to basically preserve Mr. Former Deputy Kevin Carpenter's, testimony, because as you probably keenly aware, they tried to take defendants and pin them against each other and offer you a better deal if you testify. And proper impeachment and the credibility of an individual and their witness can't be looming over their head a domestic violence investigation, an insurance fraud investigation, and potential prosecution for domestic violence. If I was a domestic violence advocate or a domestic violence advocate organization, I would be highly disturbed and disappointed in the fact that former investigator Jones received these information and took no action. And Sheriff Bianco and Under Sheriff Donald Sharp were briefed on this investigation in detail multiple times, including their what's called a notification of incident that goes up the chain of command, why they failed or they intentionally withheld such information and did not order an investigation of this magnitude. Because domestic violence is serious. We're mandated reporters. We're mandated to peace officers are mandated to conduct an investigation. So they failed it. So that, in a nutshell, is what I believe is this investigation was designed to get a conviction. This investigation was designed to be deceitful, to the point, in fact, that if you pull court records, it was later discovered that the district attorney intentionally held 283 text messages without consulting the defense or telling the defense that they did this. They later on told the court that they deemed that it was irrelevant. So they were allowed to determine what was relevant, what isn't relevant, and not allow the defense attorneys to evaluate the veracity of those text messages. And it actually changes the entire the context of the text message stream. So when we look at, and let me give you some examples, if you don't mind, if I segue into some of the testimony that former investigator Jones had testified to, because back in December, on December 22nd, I was at a store and Jones approached me. He's a civilian now. He approached me and he said he was going to sue me for defamation based on me participating in your podcasts and what I'm saying. So I asked him what I lied about, and he said his military service, amongst others, right? Okay. So you have a peace officer who's employed by the sheriff's department who conducted an investigation, right? And now he's going to sue me for defamation because I'm criticizing and bringing out certain facts in his investigation. I'm going to give you a brief overview on why I feel this investigation was corrupt and the fix was in from the start. One, they never held the Captain Lisa McConnell, accountable. Never. The interviews Jones conducted with Captain McConnell were softball interviews. None of the tough questions and why. In comparison to investigator Ed Nevins' interview, it was very blunt, very forthwith, asking why she approved it and why she blamed Flores, as casting Flores as the scapegoat in the approval. All right. Two, if we look at the March 19th, March 20th, 2020 grand jury proceedings, and I'm just going to hit some of the highlights because the record is voluminous. Deputy District Attorney showed a unsigned print copy of the CHP tow service agreement. Now, former investigator Jones testified that there were signed agreements, that everyone who participated in the tow rotation schedule at the Temecula station had signed these CHP tow agreements. That's in the record. That's his sworn statement, right? But he never proved it, right? In the in the jury trial, he said he investigated that and that there were no signed agreements. So which let me back up. In the beginning of this investigation, in I want to say June of 2019, one of the first interviews former investigator Jones conducted, right? He tells the interviewee, which I would describe as a domestic violence victim, based on my review of the record of the text messages. He says he has an obligation to investigate to the fullest. So when you do an investigation and you see that there's additional evidence or indicators of an additional crime, right, other than towing out of rotation, you have an obligation to investigate, especially if it was domestic violence. But he did it, right? He didn't. Under Sheriff Sharp had an obligation now, and then Sheriff Bianco had an obligation now. And they all knew about this on the executive staff. Sheriff Bianco knew about these domestic violence, right? Or if he says he didn't, I will use the district attorney's office analogy, right? When they talk about the defendants and how they are Kevin Carpenter, his conduct that the defendants knew or should have known, right? And that's important. Knew or should have known, because that was their theory. They argued it well. Well, Sheriff Bianco and under Sheriff Sharp knew or should have known these domestic violence. His supervisors knew about it because they downloaded the phones and they got the evidence, right? Should have been thoroughly investigated. Instead, it was a cover-up. Let's talk corruption and cover-up of a domestic violence. Now, if further down in Mr. Jones, former investigator Jones's interview, he tells another interviewee, right? In one hand, he's saying he's going to investigate to the fullest, and that means everything, right? All crimes. And in another interview, he says, I'm going to investigate only in relation to the complaint received. And that complaint was received in early February of 2019 by S&R Towing in Temecula about Kevin Carpenter towing out of rotation. Keep in mind, all the rotations were all the tows were legal. It was roughly 21 to 28 tows over a 4-month period that were out of rotation. Okay, with that being said, we can see that former investigator Jones, is not investigating to the fullest, but we also know that he, in a later interview, when he told an interviewee that he's going to investigate only to the point of this complaint, is negligent. It's negligence in the performance of his duties, and I think it's an intentional negligence of the performance of his duties. So that's just one example of his testimony, how it varies from the grand jury to trial. So let me go. I've been reviewing the case, and making some notes and comments on it, which is very, very disturbing, right? He used the wrong tow rotation schedule, right? Now, was that intentional? Was it intentional due to incompetence? I'm sorry, was it unintentional due to incompetence, or was it intentional to deceive the grand jury and the district attorney's office to get that ultimate goal by Sheriff Bianco and to show the public that he's tough on corruption, right? So a good and thorough investigator, right, would have looked at the documents that the tow rotation schedule and would have recognized that these were two different schedules, but he didn't, right? He didn't do it. He didn't look at it. And for all you young and hardworking investigators with the utmost integrity, honesty, and professionalism, I would remind you, when you do your investigation, you read every word on that document, every word, every line on that document, right? Force yourself to do it. Then you will discover a lot of crucial information and how to proceed with your investigation. Now, I don't know if Deputy Jones intentionally ignored the two different revision dates on the tow rotation schedule or not, but either way, it's either incompetent, grossly incompetent and negligent failure to perform his duties, or it was an intentional to deceive the grand jury. So with that, when I look at it, I think using the wrong tow rotation schedule, Jones, over a 4-month period, if I'm not mistaken, came out with 48 tows out of rotation. There are lawfully tows under the vehicle code, right? And so that in 48 in a 3-4 month period seems a lot, right? It's a lot to present to the grand jury. But the reality was there was 28, 21 if you look at it closely. In one case, Investigator Jones looked at a California Highway Patrol Form CHP 180 that is used to tow. And that vehicle was towed to DJ's Towing at the time, who was also a AAA, has a contract with AAA. Jones categorized those two tows as out of rotation. But when you look at the form, those are what we call owner's request. The owner requested AAA because they had AAA insurance, where there's only two AAA at the time tow companies that contracted with them, and they divided the city. This was in an area covered by DJ's Towing at the time. DJ's Towing is no longer in existence because of this case, and that's unfortunate. But Jones attributed that as two out of rotation tows by former Deputy Kevin Carpenter, and that it was a violation of department policy. Right, but it's not a law. But he contributed all this as a violation of the laws in regards to bribery. Now, those two tows, right? Mr. Flores and Mr. Cristalon knew or should have known that they were towed out of rotation, right, to DJ's Towing, right? But they were lawfully towed to DJ's Towing because the owners requested AAA. And see, that's a distortion of the truth, distortion of the facts. And that goes back to former Investigator Jones, who's going to sue me for defamation on his based on his investigation for calling him out on it, which I welcome that. I can't wait to depose him, and I have numerous questions for him. So we know that he used the wrong tow schedule, which resulted in wrong information presented to the grand jury. And there are other witnesses who were less than honest or dishonest in the grand jury. Then we segue into his testimony at trial, and I'll just give you a couple because I know I don't want to take up a lot of time. One was he testified that he redid the tow schedule, his spreadsheet, to show all these unlawful these tows out of rotation, and he said he did it in December. It was December of 2023, November at the end of the year. However, there's an email thread, that shows that the deputy district attorney was altering the spreadsheet presented to the grand jury in March of 2023. So which one is it? You did it, or did the DA's office do it? Right? I think the DA's office did it because at the time of that email, they said they were working on revising the spreadsheet because the information was erroneous. So bad data in equals bad, a bad result. And again, so former Investigator Jones, which one is it? Are you lying on the stand, or was the district attorney through their email communication inaccurate or lying themselves? I believe the deputy district. Oddly enough, I believe the deputy district attorney office was working diligently when they figured out, oh, damn, Jones used the wrong schedule, and that would have created a different timeline. That would have created 48, 96. What they threw out all kinds of numbers down to 21 over a 4-month period. That would have created, is this some type of tow bribery scheme based on an agreement to keep an agreement that was never signed? There's no signed agreement, right? Because again, Investigator Jones testified that. So another issue I had was the fact that one of Jones's irritating things that he told me in the store was, I question his service in the United States Marine Corps. Well, when you get on the witness stand and you say that the status of forces agreement expressly authorized you to conduct a civilian criminal investigation on an Afghan national police chief, and you have no documentation whatsoever to prove that, but you said it on the stand. And then when the defense attorneys brought up the status of forces agreement, you had to admit that you wrong. I'll say wrong. He had to admit he was wrong. I think he intentionally lied. The status of forces agreement they presented to him does not give him that authorization. In fact, it prohibits them from doing criminal investigations because they didn't want the host nation, where our military is so proudly serving, to conduct criminal investigations on military personnel. and that the Military Criminal Investigation Division of the United States Marine Corps would conduct all those internally on the Uniform Code of Military Justice, right? Makes sense. So if Jones lied about the agreements being signed, and, as my mind turns, that's volume 1, page 25, bait stamp 30 of the grand jury transcripts. If you read down there, when you read those transcripts, you'll see where he says, and they sign it. So if he lied about that, if he lied about the status of forces agreement, what makes you think he isn't lying about the fact that he conducted this investigation? If he conducted this investigation, I'm pretty sure the United States Marine Corps would have probably gave him some type of attaboy or certificate. Or if he attended this training that he said he attended at Camp Pendleton that isn't on his DD 214. He said not all training is not on the DD 214. I'll give him that, probably not. But critical, important training is, because that's is in your file, because that's what is bases on I would imagine promotions, right? Look at what training and education this Marine has, and he should be promoted. Now let's keep in mind, if you pull up, the United States Marine Corps rank structure, he was an E5, I think. And that's a 3-stripe young sergeant. That's four ranks above the honorable Marine graduating boot camp. Excuse me. And so, it leads me to believe, and I'm not the smartest guy or the sharpest pencil in the box, but led me to believe that if you look at that rank structure and they show it online, all the ranks, why wouldn't they assign this to a gunnery sergeant, a first sergeant, sergeant major, a lieutenant, right? I don't know. They reached down to one of the lowest ranking, and inexperienced Marines and said, you're going to do this on this National Afghan Police chief. You're going to do this, right? So that's why I think he was dishonest and, quite frankly, lied about it, because there's no evidence that he did it. You just can't get on the stand and say you did something. You should have something corroborating. Another fact that I have on it was, this whole lean cell car the guy BM. He testified that he interviewed BM, who's listed on the lean cell of the 79 Corvette. He testified to that in court. He said he didn't write a report. He said he has a recording of it though. But do you think they ever turned it over to the defense? No, right? And which segue me into during the defense investigation, when we were looking at it, there is at least 3 other individuals who are claiming that former investigator Jones interviewed him, adamantly complaining they interviewed him, one even argued about Jones saying that there were signed agreements, and the individual who's in the tow industry for the last 35 years said there is no tow. There hasn't been a tow agreement in Temecula since 1996. And that, they had an argument on it, but that didn't boast well for Investigator Jones's investigation and what the predisposed disposition that Sheriff Bianco wanted, because he wanted his corruption case, he wanted his corruption conviction, and the distortion of the text messages take out of context all the time. But now we have 3 people saying that they were interviewed by former investigator Jones, but we have no evidence of that because Jones never wrote a report. Now we have him on the stand saying, oh, I interviewed BM, but I didn't write a report. I interviewed him 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't write a report, but I have a recording. We'll turn it over. Turn it over. I'll be happy to come back on your podcast and say, hey, he turned it over on that particular topic. I was wrong, and I'll apologize. But the overall investigation, really was incompetent. It is grossly incompetent based on his 6 years experience at the time. Or is it intentional? Was it they intentional deceive? Did they the grand jury? Did they intentional deny this domestic violence victim justice? Now you're looking, it's 2025, the statute of limitations, could very well be expired on the insurance fraud, likely, but maybe not the domestic violence law. Maybe if I remember right, there's some 275 of the penal code. I think they extended that statute of limitations. And I don't know if that's retroactive, you know. And then when we look at the insurance fraud and the guns, Kevin Carpenter filed an insurance claim in 2018 claiming his guns were stolen and got several $1,000s of it. But yet Investigator Jones did a search warrant at his house, found the guns that were reported stolen, but decided he wasn't going to investigate this insurance fraud, nor was he going to investigate Kevin Carpenter, former Deputy Sheriff Kevin Carpenter, being in possession of stolen firearms. Because once they're reported and enter the system, they're stolen, right? Interesting, because he was on one hand, doing a thorough investigation, or he says, I have the obligation to investigate to the fullest extent, right? Or two, was he just so focused on only the complaint by S&R Towing in Temecula about vehicles being towed out of rotation? It was a legitimate complaint, but once you start an investigation, you have to look at any and all potential violations and investigate those as well. Okay, it's not just, oh, I'm just going to do this so I can get promoted. And I think that was it. He got promoted. And oddly enough, now that we know that former investigator Nicholas Brian Jones did a report interview, didn't write a report, didn't turn over the recording, right? The DA's office, Natasha Soresi and Dave Allen, I will use their theory, their analogy, their guidelines, I guess. They knew or should have known, because that's what they held the defendants to. They knew or should have known what Kevin Carpenter was doing at 2 o'clock in the morning. They knew or should have known, even though they weren't in this chain of command, at the time, they knew or should have known. So Dave Allen and Tasso Soresi knew or should have known that Jones did an interview with BM, had a recording. My question is, did the prosecutors have that recording? Right? And now we have this, now you have jeopardy where he gets on the stand, and it'd be interesting. He said he was involved in 68 Central Homicide Unit investigations. 68. Of those 68, how many interviews he conducted and didn't write a report, or destroyed or got, the recording? Did he enter the recording into evidence as procedure? Of those 68 Central Homicide Unit investigations, how many other courses of actions, investigative actions, did he take? Did he do a search warrant for phones like he did in this case, and yet did nothing about evidence of other crimes? Or did he do a search warrant or process a crime scene that he failed to document the evidence or ignore the evidence? I don't know. I can only base it on the fact that, it's clear, there's clear and convincing evidence that Investigator Jones was either grossly incompetent, couldn't handle the investigation, nor his supervisor at the time, Sergeant Sean Brown, nor when they presented it to the Sheriff Bianco and the executive staff, did they have any questions for him? They didn't ask about the domestic violence. They didn't ask for clarification. They didn't bifurcate it. So, that is my one of the issues I have with this case, that it wasn't thoroughly investigated, right? The second issue is Eric Nevins' report. Eric Nevins' report was a very thorough, detailed report. I would have liked to ask Sergeant Lenton at the time why he removed 57 pages from Eric Nevins' report and rewrote the conclusions, and then put his name on a document, that he didn't author or investigation he didn't conduct. The proper way to do it was to write a separate report and say, I've reviewed, Private Investigator Eric Nevins' report, and I disagree with his conclusions based on the following department policies and procedures. And then write it yourself. You don't, and the issue I have is you removed that information, but in the narrative forms, you kept the letterhead and footer of Eric Nevins, of Private Investigator Eric Nevins. It screams, inappropriate to me to do that. You can disagree with another investigator's investigation and his or her conclusions, but you have to do that independently. You shouldn't be removing stuff from that investigator's work product and then turning it over to Flores, Chris DeLon, and saying, "Oh, this is it." That's shady at a minimum, corruption and deceit and deception at the best, and all approved and authorized and ran through Sheriff Bianco. Because remember, if you look at Sheriff Bianco, one of the things he said in his interview, especially when he was advocating on several topics in regards to the presidential camp, he says the only badge that matters is and uniform that matters is mine. So he is responsible. He is the department head. You know, when you look at service of above self, who are they serving? Interesting enough, service above self, as opposed to, you know, the models of integrity, honesty, and professionalism. So when you look at integrity, honesty, and professionalism, because I worked for 5 sheriffs, the other 4 had integrity, honesty, and professionalism. All right. When you look at that, you look at former investigator Jones's investigation. Was it honest? Well, I can tell you that from the information that he provided in comparison of his investigation, in comparison to the information that he testified under sworn testimony, no, he was not honest. He was not honest. And if he wants to sue me, find some attorney to sue me for defamation of character, defamation based on his work product, that's I find that's a uphill battle, but you know, that's his choice. I have quite a number of questions to
Can
ask
I
him.
ask you something about
You
that?
know,
Like, wouldn't that help the
sure.
Sam Flores case if you asked him questions that indeed showed that this was a flawed investigation and potentially at its highest that Sam was framed?
Yes, that would definitely help Flores, Crystalline, and Close, most definitely, because, well, if he tells the truth, we know he has a track record of being dishonest, in my opinion. You know, that's, I mean, based on the record. So is he going to tell the truth? Is he going to provide the recordings? You know, that in and of itself, you know, to testify to an interview and not provide those recordings to the defense really violates due process, right? The due process of the defendants, of Flores, Crystalline, and Close, violate their due process rights, right? They have a right. They have a right to get that individual's name before trial. And keep in mind, this happened. The trial was in 2014, June, I think of June of 2024. This happened in 2019. They had, and he was interviewed. They have a right to say, get that report, get that recording, and interview BM. They have a right to do that. They have a right to call BM, but they were denied that right in that process to call BM to testify to where in San Diego did he purchase that 79 Corvette, right? And then you could have got to that 79 Corvette and you would have said, where did that company, that you know, roadside automotive repair and sales company in San Diego, where did he get that 79 Corvette? Where did that originate from, right? And you would have been able to say that, you know, Mr. Flores didn't obtain that 79 Corvette. BM obtained it on an offer up sale, which he took advantage of because that was his dream car, right? But we don't know where it originated from. They were just saying that, hey, it originated from Flores, right? You know, because Natasha Soresi said in her disingenuous questioning, other than the 79 Corvette, what else did the Flores get for free? So her question's not evidence, but the jury heard it. Questionings may not be evidence, but they damn well will influence the jury, right? You know, what does the answer mean to the jury without the question, right? So, you know, I've always wondered, the question isn't evidence, but the answer is, right? So, you know, that's just my opinion on the matter.
I mean, this sounds like an
So,
investigation that's just like so deeply flawed. I mean, it just on its surface, and I'm not, you know, I'm not
right.
a professional, you know, sheriff's deputy or whatever.
Right. I mean, and one of the things when between the grand jury in March of 2020 and the jury trial in June of 2024, I believe it was, the defense brought this to the attention of Sheriff Bianco and his staff, and they did absolutely nothing. They still had an opportunity to investigate. They even filed a complaint against former investigator Jones for dishonesty. When I say dishonesty, he testified there were signed agreements in the grand jury. There are no signed agreements. That's dishonest. Remember, he conducts his investigations to the fullest, right? To the fullest. Taking him for his word on that, and we know he didn't, but couple that with the fact that he's only going to investigate in regards to the complaint by SNR Towing that was received. The service tow agreement is part of that complaint. And he knew prior to the grand jury, because he said at the jury, he investigated fullest, he investigated it, and there were no signed agreements. So he knew before he testified in the grand jury in March of 2020 that there were no signed service tow agreements at the Temecula station, and it was being run nilly-willy, quite frankly, by Captain McConnell, right? You should have had some service agreements in place, and they should have been signed. That's traffic 101 for a commander at any station. With that being said, he knew, and he lied, because he investigates to the fullest, taking him on his word. I can pull the transcripts, and then in one interview he says, "I'm only going to investigate to the point of, the SNR complaint on 3 vehicles being towed out of rotation," right? Well, he brought it up. He brought up the tow service agreement. He knew about it. It had nothing to do with the domestic violence allegations that he received in text messages and emails. It had nothing to do with the filing false insurance claim and Kevin Carpenter he was possession of stolen firearms because they were entered into the system as stolen. He signed on the bottom line when he made that false complaint, and he signed on the bottom line when Kevin Carpenter filed a insurance claim and got a nice 5-figure check over it, from what I understand. And so he ignored those. He ignored those because those weren't part of the complaint. That is an intentional failure to perform. That is a cover-up right there. You covered that up. And now you have this domestic violence victim calling the defense, wanting to know what she can do. Well, you can't get any resolve from the sheriff's department. The DA's office is not going to help you. So the only thing I could recommend was call the California Attorney General's office, their public integrity unit, and explain it to them. And maybe they will just take up this investigation just to be thorough. But at the end of the day, the sad fact of the matter has the statute of limitation expired? And people got promoted. He got promoted over this investigation. You have a 6-year employee with minimal experience compared to a 25 master investigator.
So are you
Don't utilize
it. Saying that people are being rewarded for potential misdeeds?
Oh, absolutely. In this case, absolutely. You get promote. This got him his promotion and his supervisors promoted. The question I would ask is, one of the questions I would ask Sheriff Bianco is, why didn't you assign this to a master investigator? Why did you contract out to a private investigator? 40 years of experience, you had him do an investigation. If you would assign this to a master investigator from Jumpstart, you would have had a thorough, complete an honest investigation, quite frankly. And I know that, given an opportunity, that the sheriff's department, they have tried. I've talked to people, they have tried to fabricate a case on me. It's now called the Flores matter. I know of three or four people who are saying they tried to Flores me. They're going to Flores me, because everybody knows within the organization that this was a shoddy investigation. This was a setup. Quite frankly, they ignored things and they accepted things, and that includes the deputy district attorney's office. The deputy DAs, they're the public integrities unit, and they go, and this was just another feather in their cap, right? When you look at it, when you look at it, they didn't prove anything other than the fact that, Sam Flores got free lunches. Sam Flores paid for lunches. So I go to lunch when I was working. I went to lunch all the time with civilian personnel, city officials, vendors, that are part of the city. Sometimes I pay, sometimes they pay. In fact, I went to what's called the WRCOG conference, Western Riverside County Office of Governments, I think it was. There's a fee for that. There's a fee to attend their banquet. I never paid it. It was paid for by the cities. They're going to arrest me for bribery now?
I mean,
You know,
it seems like this man's life, from what I've heard, was absolutely destroyed because of this. I mean, this seems like a really flimsy reason to destroy a man's life.
well, it's not a flimsy reason per se. It is a strategy by Sheriff Bianco to prove to the public, a very naive public, that hey, we got this. We got text messages, and we got lunches. So this is obviously a bribe of an agreement that was never an agreement in place because it was never signed. And if you don't have a signed agreement, do you have an
I mean,
agreement?
I'm sorry.
When
I
you're
got to
dealing with
mention
it,
this. I mean, with him calling me like, with the allegations he made against me, it's almost as if like it's like he's doing this stuff for a show as opposed to doing the basic Sherlock Holmes thing and investigating actual crimes. It's almost like he wants to put on a show as opposed to do his job.
well, absolutely. Keep in mind the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is a stepping stone for his governor. He's running for governor. He's according to him, his motto is this: only the sheriff can save us now. I didn't know I needed saving in California. I mean, I lived here a long time, but the level of arrogance of that motto, is only, well, what's he saving stuff for? But he in my opinion, he tried to Flores you as well. Right now, you have the DA's office back in his play. Quite frankly, they received the case, they're prosecuting it. Right. He's been proven to lie, and I said it before, and I'll say it again. He had all the information before his press release, but he made a conscious decision. He made a choice to go out there and accuse you of being an attempted presidential assassin. And in that same press conference, he said, "Common sense and reality." Common sense and reality. Well, where the hell in the penal code is common sense and reality an element of a crime? But his common sense of reality is that you is to accuse
what's
you.
going on here? I gotta ask this because the DA is supposed to hold the sheriff in check, and when this guy, just based on the whistleblower interviews and investigations we've done, should be nowhere near having the power of a sheriff. What's going on with the district attorney, Michael Hestrin?
Well, the DA's office, their public integrities unit is designed for that, to investigate public corruption. And the sheriff is an elected official. So in my humble opinion is he's exempt. The DA's office isn't going to go after the sheriff. That's why the California Attorney General's office are conducting a civil rights violation into the sheriff and how he's running the department. You're dealing with an elected official that truly believes he's above the law. He's above reproach and above accountability. That's why he adamantly opposes some type of oversight commission. Well, if you have nothing to hide and you're being truthful and honest, right? A committee or a commission is not going to do anything to you, right? The facts are the facts. This is what happened. The problem with the way the law is set up is the county board of supervisors, either by appointment or vote, they assign people to, say, the Riverside County Public Safety, committee or commission. It's like a police commission that LAPD has, right? Sheriff Bianco can't go in there. If you look at his sheriff's advisory board, in a board meeting, in a county board meeting, which you have spoken quite often at, he told the board of supervisors that he has a sheriff's advisory committee, and only he appointed these people. He appointed an advisory committee that is like-minded, who is not going to challenge him. And we know what happened when people challenge him; they get fired, right? They're not going to challenge him. They're going to pat him on the back, tell him he did a good job, right? And nothing is going to stop that, right? The way the state has it set up is the county board of supervisors, via appointment or by vote, appoint the people who are on this board. And it could be anybody. It could be prior law enforcement. It could be attorneys. It could be civil rights organizations. It could be, ACLU. It could be people from the Inland Empire, minority communities, the Mexican minority communities, Black minority communities, could be on this board. And I would encourage the Board of Supervisors to start that process. I'm a big believer of the fact that if I have 15 people watching me, evaluating me, it's going to make me better as a sheriff's investigator. It's going to make me better as a sheriff's sergeant. It would make me better as a sheriff's lieutenant, right? It would make me better as a sheriff's captain. These individuals look at it from the outside in. They have they would be trained and have experience in like POBAR rights, the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, and how a department operates, in preserving and safeguarding the constitutional rights of everyone within Riverside County and out if we contact people in other counties as a course of their investigation. Why wouldn't you welcome that? They would also sit there and say, hey, Sheriff, I don't think it's appropriate you're accusing people of a heinous criminal act or attempting to commit a heinous criminal act without any proper evidence, right? So when you look at that, when you look at why he's anti-board, is because the way the law is set up is he has no say in the matter on who gets on the board. He can't appoint Under Sheriff Donald Sharp to the commission, right? He can't appoint a family friend or a relative to the commission. This is all done by a Board of Supervisor appointment or vote. You can't do that. That'd be very difficult, and it would provide a civilian insight of the conduct of the sheriff and how much money he's spending, taxpayer dollars. Where is he spending it? Is it appropriate to spend in that manner? For example, on that, there's a posse. People are going to hate me for this, but there's a sheriff's posse. He has, maybe a dozen people dedicated to that posse. They have their own horses, right? And I'm being told that the department bought. So if you have your own horse, you probably have your own trailer and your own truck. But the department reportedly, and I haven't confirmed it, bought trailers and trucks for the posse. The department also paying to care and feed for your personal horse, right? That would be something that the Board of Supervisors and the audit controller should look into. It's like, wait a minute, they already own a horse. They're already feeding their horse. If true, I say if true because I haven't verified it. In comparison to the canine program, right? Canines are purchased by the department. They are a less than lethal tool that the department uses. Canine deputies have a certain skill set, a very unique, specialized skill set in managing and caring for their canine. Now, the canines are cared for by veterinarians, right? The cost is incurred by the department, right? Because they're department property. The canine handlers are afforded an allotment to feed and care for the canines, which are department property. They even get extra hours to do that, and they're paid hours to do that, which is department property. So when I look at the canine program, when the canines are property of the sheriff's department, and then I look at the posse program, the horses were already owned by the employees. They enjoy riding horses. God bless them. You have horses, you enjoy riding them, fine. But then you join the posse. So why did the taxpayers have to pay for you to care for your horse, feed your horse? If true, I'm saying if true because that's the information that I'm hearing from people that why do they pay for and feed for horses that are their personal property? If true, I want to preface that because some information I get isn't all that accurate, right? This could be inaccurate, but that'd be a good question, for someone in the audit controller, or maybe the Board of Supervisors to ask, because he might tell you that Bianco might say it's none of your business. I'm running for governor. Leave me alone. He's gonna, Under Sheriff Sharp is supposed to get appointed to sheriff when he wins the governor's seat. So. But yes, overall is, and you see that with these interviews or these articles coming about the in custody deaths and his, what really was disingenuous was his RSO podcast when he talked about 18 or 19 in custody deaths where, his statements were in direct conflict of the written report and audio recordings. So when you look at the overall conduct of Sheriff Bianco and his staff, it's very disingenuous. So, and that's why the Flores being Flores, when someone Flores is you, that's why I think he's emboldened to lie to the public. Because the residents of Riverside County that support him are supporting him blindly. Take a look. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect.
I mean, let me ask you, I gotta ask you, because what he did to Flores and what he tried to do to me, and got away with on many accounts in terms of the literal, trying to frame somebody for something they didn't do, which, by the way, is a federal crime. I mean, there seems to be no punishment for crimes like this. This is something that, why are we here talking about this, especially in my instance, which, was a gross false accusation, when that it is indeed a crime to report false information to the feds, which is obviously what he did, because he did it to the whole world. Why is this man still a free man when the law says that he should be prosecuted?
Right, and I would file a complaint with the FBI, or whoever handles that jurisdiction. And one of the things I would say is when he made a false report to the feds, I would imagine that would be him having the Joint Terrorism Task Force knocking on your parents' door. You're making a report to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is a federal task force. So you're making that report and you want them to go do that. Was that a report because that investigative conduct, you wanted them to go investigate, that you're an assassin?
So you're
right, without any
saying
evidence?
that he did that. He's the one that put the anti-terrorism task force basically trying to do a unlawful SWAT on my parents' home.
Absolutely. He's the sheriff. Only his uniform and his badge matter. And everything in this particular case, it was presented to the DA's office, or I'm sorry, to the Sheriff Bianco and his executive staff. And he probably did. He said, let's get JTTF out there. Right? Regardless, they showed up. Why did they show up? They showed up because Riverside County Sheriff's Department calls them. They just didn't show up out of the blue. Right?
Okay, the feds clear me almost instantly. The FBI clears me almost instantly, but yet 2 days later, Chad Bianco is seeking the Joint Terrorism Task Force on my parents.
Correct. I absolutely believe that. Based on my training and experience, what happens is you're out here. We have a Joint Terrorism Task Force. Their sister task force in Vegas. They put the sister task force in San Francisco, New York. these Joint Terrorism Task Force, are used for exactly that. When there's some type of threat, then the Joint Terrorism Task Force investigates it. Right? Obviously, Bianco reported a threat, that you were a threat. He went on, had a press conference and went on national and international, claiming that he foiled a third assassin attempt of President Trump, and that you were the assassin.
And the unbelievable thing here is this coward Mike Hestrin. I mean, what a pathetic individual. Like, what I've described is so many federal crimes. And honestly, the feds are pathetic in this too, because the fact that I'm still being persecuted with these bullshit charges, by the way, the two things they filed is, carrying a loaded firearm in public, which wasn't even the word by word that law in itself is false, because that would mean I'm carrying it in my person. But what I've since learned is that in California, they passed that on, having it in your trunk is carrying, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you have an expired registration, which is an infraction.
Which is basically nothing. It's not even like a... Yeah.
Correct. It's a fix-it ticket.
So, I mean, what do you think? I would love to hear your opinion. Do you think Mike Hestrin... I mean, I got to make a point here, and I know people are going to watch this, which, by the way, guys, this started off as, hey, Michael, could you give me a 1-minute statement about the Sam Flores case? And honestly, it's turned into a whole episode.
Sorry.
It's okay, but we had to do an episode about the framing of Sam Flores is what it sounds like, which is insane. It's insane that that man's life is ruined, and the same thing happened to mine. My life's become exponentially difficult since you Google my name and you find nothing but controversy in every aspect of the word. Of
Right.
having something traumatic like this happen to your life. But so the DA Hestron, he's absolutely doing nothing. I mean, it's pretty clear cut that he has a criminal operating as a sheriff there, operating under the color of law. What's going on there now? I mean, how do you deal with something like that when basically the entire Riverside seems to be run by people that are okay with crime, as long as it's done
Mhm.
by them?
Right. No, I see your point. I see on the federal violations, the Riverside DA's office doesn't prosecute for federal violations. So I would highly encourage you to file complaints with the federal authorities. As for um, obviously his lies about you, seek remedy in the civil arena, in the civil court, and also publicizing this, because the only way that voters are going to come to
I mean,
recognize
sorry
the
to interrupt
the
you, man.
the
It's like this man put a death warrant out on my head. I mean, it's like there's no way for me to,
Mhm.
when 2 days after the feds are saying this guy is not guilty, and then I didn't understand the full extent of how the anti-terrorism force worked. And what's interesting is that until today, this is being recorded February 9, 2025. The LVMPD and the Riverside sheriffs continue to prevent us from getting body cams because they basically went in cahoots with one another. This is why I've had reason to fear for my life, honestly, because these guys were in cahoots. This is like just the most corrupt thing ever, where the feds, who are the jurisdiction that would actually deal with this sort of thing, they say, we're checked
Right.
out, it's done. And then 2 days later, 12, and by the way, they show up with false information, which we've already verified too, that I was armed, that I'm, still considered an assassin suspect. I mean, all this insanity, still in writing, according to Chad Bianco's false accusations, which is then used to go and essentially traumatize my parents, almost force SWAT their home if I didn't have a very politically connected friend. I mean, this is insane. This is just there. You know what I'm realizing, honestly? This is supposed to go in a section of my documentary called American Justice. There is no such thing as American justice. It's bullshit. It's like
No.
you could have tyrants, piece of garbage criminals like Bianco, and frankly, the gutless loser Mike Hestron. And I know they're going to be watching this, and I know they're going to try to throw the book at me for a misdemeanor and probably lock me up and all that stuff. But the public needs to know. I mean, these are the gutless kind of cowards and criminals that are running our counties
Right.
right now.
I talked to some defense attorneys, because I was I'm always supportive of the DA's office and pro prosecution. That's just, I mean, I did 31 years in the sheriff's department. But I talked to some defense attorneys, at least in the cases that I handled. I've always assisted defense attorneys if they needed something in court. I've handed them my report, my case book. This is what I have. I never did an interview that I didn't record or provide to the defense. And several defense attorneys asked me. They told me they didn't understand why I was shocked and surprised that they withheld text messages, why they altered a report, while they withheld a report or didn't turn over a recording, which all happened in the Flores matter. Why they lied about the authority of a lieutenant in comparison to a captain, which happened in this investigation, right? They say it happens all the time. Say it happens all the time. And a good thing, and they knew about it, right? Because Natasha Soresi's motion in limine, they wanted to limit the challenge of Kevin Carpenter, who they put on the stand, right? He had pled guilty, who they put on the stand. They wanted to limit the scope that the defense could challenge them based on not having an investigation done, right? Not having a domestic violence. You're going to accuse him of domestic violence and not have an domestic violence investigation done. Beautiful strategy, very foresight, very thinking, because the jury would have been like, wait a minute, this guy, he's looking at there's clear and convincing evidence that there was possibly domestic violence going on, that he should have been investigated, but he wasn't, right? The jury would have been like, this guy's not only a liar, he's an abuser, he's probably going to sue me for that, for saying that it's my opinion.
Through basically keeping away evidence that would be crucial for the real undergoing of justice, which I'm sure they're going to try to do in my case. I mean, what I've heard is that they're try to nullify my audio recording as if it doesn't exist, and we'll make sure 100 million people have seen it by then. So, it's unfortunate that you have to play these games, by the way. It's unfortunate that we have to now deal with the court of public opinion when this stuff should be taking place in actual courts. But when you're dealing with this level of corruption, how could you rely on them?
Right. And what you and your attorney need to do is, basically argue the fact that you cannot properly defend yourself if you don't get all the body worn camera footage, from start to finish, not just pieces of it. Not only do you want body worn camera footage of your incident, but that you want body cam worn footage for the entire event, right? So whatever deputy that started that shift, was it Coronado or something? You want his body worn camera footage for the entire day. We want to know how he was conducting his screening before you, during you, and after you. So I look at that when I conduct a criminal investigation, a homicide. I want to, and for you young, honest, hardworking men and women of the Sheriff's Department, you want to investigate and document not only the incident itself, but you want to investigate and document the pre-incident activity. What occurred prior to this crime? And you can go back an hour, you can go back 2-3 days based on what information you receive. So you want to know pre-incident activity, the actual incident of crime, and then you want to know post-incident activity. What occurred what did the suspect or witnesses do after the incident, the crime, right? So when you investigate a crime, to be thorough and complete, you want to do, once again, pre-incident activity, the crime itself, and post-incident activity, right? It gives you a bigger, broader picture of what has been occurring, right? Because Sheriff Bianco said nobody else brought in guns, but did they ask him? Right? He said that
that's the biggest bullshit ever. I mean, I've taught that he's unfortunately started this whole fear about guns, but so many people came forward and said, "Oh, I had guns in my trunk too. You just don't tell them." Which I guess honesty is the best policy when it comes to crooked cops.
And so in your case, I would have your attorney ask for the 24-hour footage of this, right? And also this was an event, so I would ask for the operational package, how this event is going to be put on and how it may or may not relate to you. The operational package is done whenever there's an event, whether it's a concert, whether it was a Grand Prix through the city streets of a city, the Balloon and Wine Festival. There's always an operational package done on what the goals and objectives in this case, it's going to be the Trump rally. So that's what I would ask for.
Amazing.
And then most recently they had one of Sheriff Bianco's hire who had 500,000 fentanyl pills. He pleaded directly to the court, and the court appropriately sentenced him because it was a nonviolent crime. It was a first offender, and now everybody's in an uproar. And here's what, and this segues into the corruption, what I think, or inappropriate conduct. There was an incident that occurred where another deputy was arrested, and the deputy district attorney said that they were ordered not to offer any plea or enter in any negotiations for any RSO employee, basically, that has been arrested and prosecuted. So now you'll see deputies who are erred in judgment and conduct, right? Law enforcement isn't immune of personnel, committing crimes. These employees erred in conduct and judgment, violated the law, and now you're seeing, I know of 3 of them who pled directly to the court, you know, and of course, over the objection of the DA's office and the sheriff's department. Well, as a defendant, you have the right to plead guilty. At any point in time, you could plead guilty and plead directly to the court. And in these cases, my understanding, and you can talk to your attorney about that, they've actually had a hearing on what the judge would. In one case, I know that the attorneys would be like, "Hey, Your Honor, my client's being treated differently because of A, B, C, D, and E, because he was a deputy sheriff." But if he wasn't a deputy sheriff, the history is nonviolent, not a threat to public safety. So why is he being treated differently? This case there would have been a plea offer. You plead guilty to a misdemeanor. We'll make it a misdemeanor, and we'll put you on summary probation. And you go through some classes, whatever it might be, DUI classes,
So
classes.
You're saying they're clearly treating this case differently.
I think that they're clearly treating your case differently. If they haven't offered you a plea negotiation, I know when it's an RSO employee, that's why you see them pleading directly to the court, right? Especially if it's your first time offense and it's nonviolent, you see them pleading to the court, asking to be treated like any other defendant and follow the sentencing guidelines, right? So if you look at, Sheriff Bianco, he wants to put people in prison for life. He's since changed that, in regards to immigration. He's now saying that, he heard rumors that they were doing raids. Well, I never heard those rumors. Most of the rumors that are being spread are likely from him and his supporters. I haven't heard any rumors about RSO deputies doing raids or anything like that. I can tell you this: I receive information from all the stations and bureaus, for the exception of the Colorado River Station of Life. They're in their own little world. They're wonderful deputies, hardworking deputies, keeping the desert community safe out there along the Colorado River. So, I hear a lot of information. I receive a lot of information, some accurate, some inaccurate, but I've never heard of deputies doing raids, and to say that he's going to dispel rumors of that. And he's on the record saying that he wants to, deport everybody. He wants to work around Senate Bill 54, state law. And now he's kind of shifted to that because he's running for governor, right? You're going to see he's moving a little more to the center of the Republican Party. He's trying to move to the center to garnish maybe some Democrat registered voters and the independents. But he's clearly on the state. Clearly, his statements, are disingenuous because he keeps changing his mind about the whole thing. Either you're going to be honest, or you're going to follow the state California law because you're a California sheriff. You follow the law, and we may disagree with the law, but we still are obligated to follow.
Let me ask you, how far do you think they're going to be able to push this persecution? I mean, I'm sure Bianco would love to get a maximum jail time for me, or land me in jail or whatever. How far do you think they'll be able to push this shit, based on your experience?
Well, I think you have two things. My thing is they're going to try to push this to a conviction, right? They're going to or plea, and they're going to try to segue that and connect that into your civil claim, your civil litigation. Hey, look, he was found guilty. Yeah, well, he may be found guilty of possession of a loaded firearm and have an expired investigation, but that is leaps and bounds away of accusing someone of being an assassin, and I think that's just going to sully your reputation, but it doesn't look good. But you're in the early stages of the judicial process. You had an arraignment, then you're going to have a prelim. Make them prove their case, and then whether you're going to have a trial or not, that's something between you and your attorney. But you're in the early, but you do garner a lot of media attention and curiosity, throughout Riverside County. So, your next court date, you should really advertise, hey, this is our next court date, and preface it with something, come and watch the Wheels of Justice at the Larson Justice Center. in India. But yeah, I think they're going to go as far as they can go, unless one or two, if they're forced to offer, or they are willing to offer enter a negotiation for a plea agreement, or you plead directly to the court, and affirmative defense was, this is legal in Nevada where I come from. My apologies for crossing the state line and not recognizing the law, although ignorance is not an excuse for the law, but it is a mitigating factor, especially when you pretty much, when you reside in Nevada. I hope that makes sense. And I think the reasonable and rational judges at the Larson Justice Center would recognize that, but hey, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge, so that's my opinion on the matter. I think it's an uphill battle. He was telling everybody he was going to Washington. Apparently not.
What part is uphill battle you're saying? You think it's an uphill battle?
I think it's an uphill battle for Bianco, because he has his anti-immigration rhetoric.
You have the Attorney General.
Yes, it's uphill battle for him. I saw your recent video, which was alarming. The jail video. People ask me what did I think about that. I said, well, if we go back to our training and our guidelines, in order to use force, we must use reasonable and necessary force to overcome the force or the resistance being placed upon us or an innocent bystander. With that being said, and I'm just thinking about your video, if I remember right, the video you posted, the guy was leaning over the booking desk. He was pinned, he was safe, he was secure. And then you had this little tug of war going on, where the deputies on one side of the desk want to pull him away from a safe, secure position and slam him to the concrete floor. And my understanding, people called me on and said that individual had suffered facial fractures and was knocked out. And, when I was told that, I looked at the video again and I'm like, oh, you're absolutely correct. He hit his face on the floor. And then you can see that he had no further movement on that because he was knocked out, right? I would have loved to heard the audio. I recognize whoever videotaped that didn't have the audio for safety purposes, I guess, because the audio would have probably given an opportunity to give away the individual and location where this thing was videotaped off of the department computer. But I would have liked to have heard the audio to see how they are, what they were talking about, because you see them talking, and if I have to interpret it, they're arguing of, no, take him to the floor. No, leave him here. He's good. Take him to the floor. And then you see that little tug of war. And that's my pure speculation based on the body language, right? There was no need to. Another thing, that's always been a concern was, why don't they pad the booking desk area? Why don't they put like wrestling mats down there, right? Because you take people to the floor all the time, violent people to the floor all the time. They attack the deputies, they go straight to the floor, right? Then you get into this ground conflict, right? But if you look on the employee side of the booking desk, you see a nice rubber soft mat there that they can stand on, right? Make it a little more comfortable for them, right? Because they're always standing and they're always searching people. They're always working on the computer. So why not go to the other side and probably limit the injury of anybody who's coming in, what we call a new book, anybody who's arrested in the field, and we're going to book them into the jail, limit their injury and the injury of a department member if physical force is required. So my question probably would be one of two things: is how did they articulate there was force upon them to cause this, what I call earth slam? Throughout my year, I always call it when you take someone down, you're going to earth slam them. Why they rose to that level, and then why, what treatment they have. My intel is understanding that risk management, typically my experience is when deputies do something wrong. For example, we kick in the wrong door on a search warrant, we hit the wrong house by error, we would call risk management, send it up the chain of command, have risk management come out and settle the bill, right? Fourth Amendment violation. Clearly, we were wrong. They might offer the individual, repair costs plus inconvenient costs, you know, um, anywhere under 49,900. At least when I left, that was the limit. Anything 50,000 or above, the Board of Supervisors had to approve. Anything less than 50,000, then risk management had that authority to write that check and resolve the issue right then and there, which is, in most cases, that's the right thing to do. But yeah, that video was disturbing. It's unfortunate it had to happen. It's clearly preventable, But interesting for me is the audio. What were these two deputies? I mean, if you look at it closely, the deputies are arguing about something, and I can only speculate they're arguing about, no, keep him here, or no, I'm taking him to the ground. And then you see that brief tug of war going on there. That's not a training. They're not trained. I think they were, they need more training, more education. Because you need to constantly reinforce the training and expectations of your employees.
Yeah.
They're probably good deputies. They probably have a good history of honest work. They just, you don't want to destroy a career based on one incident. You don't want to destroy your reputation, an individual's reputation based on one incident, a misdemeanor at that, a misdemeanor infraction, so.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, I there were some flaws in the Flores matter. There were some cover-ups in the Flores matter, and there was distortion of the facts and text message in Flores matter. The bad part about it is, now we have the testimony, and now we were saying that we were being denied interviews and recording, and now we know we've been denied at least one interview and one recording, and that was at the sworn testimony of former investigator Nicholas Jones. So if he lied about that, if he didn't do a report on that interview, right, and didn't provide it to the defense, and the prosecution knew about it, or they should have known about it, then you subsequently denied due process under the 14th Amendment from the defendants. And isn't that what the criminal justice is about? To bring out the truth, right? To make a determination. These are the facts. Not
when you have honestly incompetence and criminals like Hestrin and Bianco running the show. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, because there's so much crime happening within the inside that's being covered up. I'm out here, after having my life carpet bombed, rather than getting a, sorry note, they're trying to continue to persecute me for an unconstitutional law, which, honestly, I think that's all going to go away. I don't think in Trump's time these guys are going to be successful in their scandalous endeavor, but that's what we're faced with, and I personally, loud and proud, Hestrin is gutless. And a criminal, and so is Bianco. That's a fact, and it's we got to be clear about these people and what they're doing when they are witnessing crimes and people being, set up for fake crimes and hoaxes, and they continue to just keep their mouth shut. This is the kind of garbage we're going to get, and I can't believe the man actually has the balls to run for governor and is still on Fox News, by the way, often, which tells you a lot about the kind of credible individuals within Fox. Michael, right. Is there anything you'd want to say before we wrap this up?
No. Thank you for allowing me to participate again. I appreciate your questioning and what you're working on to accomplish. I would encourage any and all individuals, to question, Sheriff Bianco in these matters, especially domestic violence advocates. Also to the hardworking men and women of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, keep working in your capacity as being with integrity, honesty, and professionalism, and keep making a difference, however slight. But make sure you go home at the end of your shift. Make a difference in the community, however slight, like you continue to do. Go home and enjoy your family and your friends, and enjoy life, and take relish and be proud that you are making a difference. And those deputies who are erring in judgment and conduct, they will eventually be found out, and they will eventually be weeded out of the profession. We are the law enforcement profession is not immune to any criminal conduct that any other profession is. It happens throughout our society, and we want to. I think the community demands that they be removed from the profession and their peace officer status be revoked and they be held accountable. And that includes Sheriff Bianco and his staff, Under Sheriff Don Sharp and his assistant sheriffs and deputies. You'll see more and more. You're seeing more and more litigation, not only from civilian plaintiffs, but former employees. Yeah, I've noticed an increase of individuals who are suing the department for a variety of issues, and that information doesn't get disseminated to the line staff. So, but that's becoming a fact that our taxpayer dollars are going to pay off the dishonesty and misconduct of Sheriff Bianco and his executive staff. So, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hope you guys all have a great Super Bowl Sunday. And enjoy the game.
Thank you. And for, the viewers out there, one last thing in closing, man, we got to get this guy Bianco out of there, and Hestron too. There's got to be a Doge type analysis on what is going on there, because I think that alone is going to expose a lot of things. It's just ridiculous that there's a class of individual that we have, really running our counties. For the viewers out there, we got a really good documentary coming up soon called The Third Assassin. That tells a lot of the story. I think it's going to expose a lot of interesting things. Make sure you check that out, and please make sure you check out AmericaHappens.com, where we have highlighted episodes over there, and I will see you all on the next episode of Blood Money. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, bro.